Hello everybody, I'm Ollie from JTV. We thought it would be an interesting idea to share with you some of the ideas we're planning to talk about in upcoming videos. Maybe some of these videos we'll do as live streams, some of them we'll just post and you can comment and ask questions, say, Ollie, why didn't you mention this? What about this issue? Have you thought about making this point? Can you clarify this question for us? We thought it would be a good way of creating some kind of dialogue with you guys. So I thought what we'd do is share with you some ideas from a video that we're working on at the moment, and you can give us your feedback, and we're going to try to respond to pretty much every comment because we want to hear what you guys have to say. So here's the topic that we're working on at the moment. The issue is the question of what does it mean to have faith, at least in Judaism, and what value does faith really have? Rabbi Kiva Tatz tells the story of he was walking along once. I don't know whether it was him or someone else, but he told the story. I think it was him. He was walking along once, and a Christian missionary approached him to have a dialogue with him. It's like you mess with the wrong guy, you know, with Rabbi Tatz. But anyway, they approached him, and he asked them a couple of theological questions. And one of the questions he asked the missionary was, you know, you say that Jesus was born through a virgin birth, right? Mary was a virgin. But you also say, you agree with us, that part of the criteria for the Messiah has to be they're descended from King David. But the lineage of one's tribe, being the tribe of Judah in this case, goes through the father. So whether or not Joseph is from the tribe of Judah doesn't really matter. He can't be, can't be descended from Judah by definition because he only has a mother in the process. And so, allegedly, the missionary responded to him by saying, "Yes, you're right, but matters of faith don't always require logic." So that's just an interesting way to start this issue. Is that really the case? If matters of faith don't require logic, what value does it have? Here's the dictionary definition of faith is a firm belief for something which there is no proof. And the question is, like, okay, if you have faith in God, right, let's say faith in God is a belief for something which there is no proof or substantial evidence, why won't I believe in the tooth fairy or the flying spaghetti monster, as I think Christopher Hitchens put it? You know, what value does it have? And then on the other hand, you could say, well, if someone responded by saying, well, no, actually, I do think you can provide sufficient evidence for the existence of God, then why do we call it faith? Why not call it knowledge? So do you see the challenging question here? And I'm just going to address only the viewpoint of Judaism. After all, this is JTV. But the issue is, if matters of faith are about lack of evidence and just choosing to believe, what value does that have? How could anyone expect me to have certain intellectual convictions if they can't be based on evidence? That seems absurd to me. Should have seemed absurd to any rational person. And then, on the other hand, if we call it knowledge, why use the word faith at all? So these are the issues. And interestingly enough, Judaism has a very unique approach to this subject. So the Rambam, Moses Maimonides, a medieval rabbinic scholar, great intellect and Jewish sage, philosopher, he declared that it is a mitzvah, a commandment to know that there is a God. That's the first commandment, to know there is a God. That's what the first of the 10 commandments are about. That's what he holds it means when it says, I am the Lord your God who took you out of Egypt. The commandment is to know that there is a God, not to believe, to know. Okay, fine. And in fact, he goes on to say that saying, I am the Lord your God who took you out of Egypt, implies I am knowable. You can connect to me, I'm knowable. The Ramchal, another commentator a little later on, said his name was Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, if you want to look it up. He said, and I quote, "Every Jew must know and believe that there exists a first being." Okay, now that's slightly different language. He's using the word know, but he's also saying believe. So what's the difference between the two? Why do you need to use both? It's all getting rather confusing. Well, this is the crux of the argument. The crux is what we mean by the word faith, or rather, what word do we use in Hebrew? And what does that word mean? Well, the word in Hebrew is emunah. And we'll go on to translate that in a second, but just so pause that for 1 second. But ask yourself the following question. Are your decisions based on your intellect or your emotions? I think most of you will probably answer both, right? At least most of you guys. I happen to know some people it's purely emotion. But other than, no, the truth is everyone is a mix of the two. And I'll give you a very simple example. Someone can decide that they want to lose weight. Okay, I happen to be one of those people. I'm currently on a diet. Already lost a stone, yay. And one of the challenges that you find is that you know from the outset that you want to lose the weight. But why is it that, chocolate brownies and muffins are so desirable? Surely, why do I sometimes convince myself, almost to the moment of breaking point, that I should go and have it, if I know it's bad for me? The truth is that all our decisions are a mixture of intellectual components and emotional components or physical components. Our physical drives and desires can cloud decisions. How many people in the realm of sexuality have made decisions that they regret just moments later? How many long-term relationships have been completely thrown away because of momentary decisions? It's because we have very strong physical impulses. Our decisions and our clarity and our beliefs are not based purely on intellect alone. It's what we call cognitive dissonance. Okay, so if that's the case, how does this all apply to faithfulness, faith? And the answer is emunah. Faith does not mean faith in Hebrew. It actually means faithfulness or trustworthiness, trusting. We say before the Shema, if you're saying it on your own, Kel Melech Ne'eman, God trustworthy King. It's actually where the root of the word Amen comes from. So what's the difference between faith and faithfulness? The difference is the following. Faith is about, I don't have enough evidence, so I'm going to believe in something. Faithfulness is, and this is the Jewish tradition, you can have enough evidence, you can have sufficient reason to believe, permission to believe. But the question is, are you going to be loyal to that truth? You can know, you can have that clarity, but you've also got emotional impulses. You might have other intellectual rationalizations in your head that are stemming from emotional desires, from physical desires and drives. And the question is, are you going to be loyal to the truth? And that's what faith really comes down to. It says in the Aleinu prayer, which we say at the end of every Jewish prayer service, a quote from the Bible, "You shall know this day and take it to your heart that there is a God." You shall know this day and take it to your heart. In other words, it's not a given just by believing in something that you're going to be loyal to that truth. It's not a given that if I want to go on a diet, I'm going to stick to my plan, because you have other desires. And the heart, the desires of the heart, represents all those emotional and physical drives. It's interesting that in the Torah reading of Beshalach, after the Jews have spent, literally days in the desert, and after literally 3 days after the splitting of the sea, they start to worry about whether God is with them or not. And they have this water crisis, worrying about whether they've got water or not. Now, and yes, it's certainly important to understand the context. They didn't have water for 3 days, and it's pretty serious. But at the same time, they had seen, miracles that no other generation has ever seen, and perhaps will ever see, at least we believe, until the Messianic era. So how could they have such clarity and then lose it? And perhaps one of the messages is, it is easy to sometimes have that cognitive dissonance. You can have that intellectual clarity, but when your emotions and your physical drives sometimes take over you, it can compel you to do all kinds of crazy things. The point is, there's really this is a different approach to what we mean by faith. We believe it to be faithfulness, and there are really two levels. There are two steps, two stages on the process. The first stage is knowledge, what we might call chachma, intellectual sense of what's true and what's not true. And then there's das, or perhaps we might use the word bitachon, which is really an inner sense of it coming into your being, it being applied into your daily actions and your daily life. And the idea is to get to a stage where you kind of have harmony between what you know and what you do. So much so that you get to the stage where you'll have a husband and wife who have been with each other for 50 years, and you ask the husband, do you love your wife? Yes. How do you know you love your wife? I just know. Like, you don't need to. It's not something you need to provide evidence for anymore. And that's the stage we believe you're meant to get to in the realm of emunah, faithfulness, which is meant to start off with that intellectual knowledge. That doesn't necessarily mean you're going to live by that or be loyal to it, but the aim is to get there, so much so to a point that it literally becomes your very essence, your very being, and it informs all the actions that you do. This is why Rabbi Yisrael Salanta, who founded the Musa movement, the character growth movement several hundred years ago, he said that the longest distance in the world is between the head and the heart. The longest distance, the hardest thing in life is working on the self. We've got a lot of people, a lot of politicians and political activists who feel like the most important, most challenging thing to do is changing the world, changing political issues. Actually, the hardest thing to do in life is to change yourself, to move yourself to become different, to introspect and to grow, and to get clarity. But then the harder thing is to apply that. That's what's difficult, the distance between the head and the heart. And finally, there's a really nice story of a Hasidic rabbi who's actually alive today, and a world-renowned psychologist called Rabbi Abraham Twersky. And he was once asked by a woman. She said to him, do you ever have doubts? Do you ever think, I'm not really sure if there's a God out there. I'm not so sure. I might have the intellectual conviction, but I just don't feel it. And he said, why do you think it is that we recite the Shema 2 times a day, in the morning and the evening? That declaration of faithfulness to God. And he said the reason is because you're a human being, and while you can know things intellectually and might have that level of clarity, sometimes it doesn't always penetrate, and you need to constantly reinforce it into your heart, into your soul. Now, there might be some people who will comment on this video and say, okay, that's all very well, Ollie, and that might be the Jewish position, but I don't think there's enough evidence. And that's really a different question. We have other videos which deal with that question. But this is really, that's a separate matter in terms of whether or not there's enough evidence for not. That's not the point of this video. This video is to say, okay, well, let's just say there is evidence, which is what we've tried to argue in previous videos. I suggest you look at videos such as the God debate, and we've got a video called Compelling Evidence for God's Existence. But if you put that to the side, let's just understand what is the Jewish approach, and that's what we're trying to go about in this video, explaining, and it really comes down to the issue of cognitive dissonance, connecting the head to the heart, being faithful and loyal to the truth.
To stay up to date with the latest JTV content, if you're on YouTube, click subscribe below the video and the alarm bell. And if you're on Facebook, click the like button, and under following, click see first.